Now, I'm going to bring this clip up here, and with a lot of the talk of the restructuring of semifinals in general, we've heard Dave mention that he thinks that the right path is something like Mayhem, where they belong inside of an affiliate. We've heard other people talk about making it more participatory. We also have had this whole thing of like, go back to a regional format, have CrossFit fund the whole entire thing. I think that option is probably not most likely, due to the fact that if there's any resources and you're scraping the bottom of the bucket, like, we cannot put them to the CrossFit Games at this point in time. Like, that has to be innovative, and those resources and money need to come from other spots outside of CrossFit.com's bank account, because the education and investment into affiliates is going to take a lot, and any distraction from that to then place back on the CrossFit Games, I think is going to give us more of the same result that we've got from before. So what's the solution for it? I don't know, but I feel like there's going to be a massive restructure. And with Dave talking about bringing it into affiliates, and then this clip here, which I'm going to play for you guys, tells me we might be gearing up to see a complete shift of the CrossFit Games season. And this might be the last one we see in this way. All right, so I'm going to play this and then we'll break it down.
ZLU87, TDC, could you never program a CrossFit? If you could never program a games workout again, who currently in the space would you have confidence in be able to program the test? Boz, for sure. Because I've worked closely with him over a number of years and kind of steered him, given him mentorship, given him advice, critiqued, gone back and forth on his programming, him with my programming. So he understands where I go with it, and what I'm looking for and what's important to have. So it would for sure be him. And we've had a great relationship over 2 decades, really. He was at the 2008 CrossFit Games. He was a demo athlete for me here out there, and he was demonstrating the thruster on the clean and jerk workout. And he demonstrated a thruster because you could squat clean it and then thruster out of it with 155. They did 30 for the finale, and he hit his tooth and chipped his tooth during the demo.
Okay, so the interesting thing here is that Dave answered that very quickly. We also know that he picks and chooses the questions. Obviously, he didn't answer mine for 4 weeks in a row. So for him to see that question, pick that question, and then answer with that much confidence that quickly around Boz, that's telling me something that Dave might be bowing out after this year in switching job titles. I think especially in the short term, it's probably really good to keep Dave on board in some degree. On the show with a Week in Review with Hobart and Dave, I talked about wanting to see Dave shift towards affiliates because he's default action oriented. So he's going to say, what are we doing? What are we working on? How does it help affiliates? And then who's in charge for executing these things, and let's get them done. So I would really like to see him be able to shift into that role. We could watch under microscope, like, what is it that he's actually doing? It was something like affiliates that there's a lot of room on the table to make some improvements and to create some opportunities for the affiliates, that it would really allow you to see what Dave does or what he doesn't do. I'm under the belief that he does default action. We see it on his YouTube channel. We see him creating his own content. He's always been pushing everything forward. So I think this would be a real opportunity to see what that would look like in a different side of the company. If you were to switch Dave out with Boz, that big shuffle would be the best time to then restructure the whole entire season. I still think there's going to be elements of it that will remain true regardless, which is going to be, it'll start at the Open, it'll end at the CrossFit Games. But the question is what happens in between? And they've done so many different variations over with this over the last 20 years. In really the last 5 too, as things have like shuffled around quite a bit. I think by now you've boiled down a couple of things that need to be addressed to make it continue to be successful. One of them has to have some sort of oversight by CrossFit.com to make sure that the programming and the test is appropriate. Number two is you have to be able to have that broadcasted and live stream in some sort of consistent manner across all of them. At least I think so. And then finally, the third one is how much does CrossFit get involved with the online portion? Do we need to have an online semifinal, or should that end at the quarters? And with him talking about Boz coming into program there, and if you've read Dave's book, which I've talked about this before, that his 20th year was kind of in his mind how he looked at his whole entire path. Like, we started the games, I have this idea of where it's going to go. That idea ends at the 20-year mark. So we might see a big makeup of what that CrossFit Games season looks like. Now, if you would ask me exactly, I would say that putting them into CrossFit affiliates and actually not worrying about the broadcast portion of the semifinal or the regional portion of it, but putting them either close to gyms or ran by that like regional area is probably the path to success. And some of them will be able to get their own live stream in, like we see now with some of these event things. But having it actually be through an affiliate rather than at a venue. I know that's kind of a random like take on it, but you could have a bunch of them spin up like sectionals were back in the day. And if you had oversight with CrossFit, you could spend all your resources there, making sure the programming and everything else is solid, and they could pull off a decent venue. Not venue, a decent event, because having everybody with all these different advantages and disadvantages and decentralizing it in the way that they have, like, you could even the playing field and just say they're all at gyms and your gym must be this dimension, this size, this many bathrooms. They have some sort of qualifying structure to being able to host it, and just prune it way back. I don't know. Mason Startup, we're going to see Atlanta Atlantis. No, what else? I don't think you're going to see. I think the programming for the games in total is going to be a lot of events, but I don't think we'll see any over the top outside of maybe like marathons and more monostructular things, long workouts, because I think the real damage that'll be done will be the accumulation of the volume over the weekend. But the big semifinals aren't going to stop like Syndicate or Torian or French Throwdown. And I don't think they should stop. The question would be is like, will they still pull as many big named athletes if they don't offer a ticket to the games by coming in the top three? And that's going to be the interesting thing. Because I don't really see these semifinals. Like, I don't see the regionals going back to like big venues with that massive participation. Like, I think we've just seen a nice and steady decline unless you do like a participatory type event where you have a ton of people there because 50% of them are competing that weekend. I feel like that's really the only way you're going to bring people back to those venues in the way that we've seen it before. Now, the way that CrossFit could own a piece of it is it could say, okay, we have all of the media rights, so we will cover nimble live streams that'll be at each one of these venues. We will cover certain athlete stories and everything else like that, and own the media to it, as well as programming oversight. But it's just so tough logistically to pull it off. And this is one of the things that made High Rocks a really successful company, is because you could repeat it. You buy the equipment, you have it for everywhere, you ship it to the locations that it's going to be at. Some of them are in regional spots so they can move them, somewhat closely. And then you set up the circus, you let everybody run through it, you break the circus down, and you move on to the next place. The problem with the CrossFit Games is it's ever changing. It's the unknown and the unknowable. So the equipments change all the time. The demands of the equipments change all the time. And with different things like that, it just continuously makes it tougher and tougher. Now, going back to the Mecca idea of a physical CrossFit HQ, it could help solve that problem by having it at the same exact spot every single year that CrossFit actually owns. I don't know the venue costs and what all goes into that, but in theory, you could potentially lower costs by having them on the venue that it sits on. All I'm saying right now is that we have a couple of different problems that the CrossFit Games season faces, maybe not even necessarily the CrossFit Games. And it's going to take a lot of restructure and potential pruning back, I think, in order to build it back up. Because it's kind of it's a little bit of a runaway chain right now. Now, partnerships could potentially change that, because with that blank check the WFP's got, if they wanted to get more involved with CrossFit and find a way that worked for them, who knows? Maybe you get somebody that comes in and invests in that portion of the CrossFit Games. But either way, I think we're up for a massive restructure. And I think this is going to be the last CrossFit Games season produced this way, as we'll see it.